Hi, and welcome to Leeds Trinity University's Journalism and Media Week. And I'm Rebecca Whittington, and I'm here today with senior broadcast journalist for the BBC, for BBC Radio Leeds, for the Politics North show, and for the Yorkshire Cast podcast, Aisha Khan. Welcome, Aisha.
Hello, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And I have to say, it's absolutely wonderful this week to be welcoming you here today. Thank you so much for joining us, because you are on day one back at work after recovering from COVID-19, are you not?
I know. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? So the last 3 weeks I've been absolutely knocked out by this thing that has become the story of the year and probably every year for a long time to come. Developed the virus about 3 weeks ago, and saw all the ups and downs of it, and then actually it's the after effects of it that have been the worst, just the exhaustion. And I've learned a lot about the virus, learned a lot about myself, obviously the world is completely different to what it was 7 months ago, and to actually have this personal insight into it is something that probably wasn't desirable, but certainly it's been interesting. But thankfully, yes, getting back on track now, and I'm so happy, because I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to join you, that my recovery was just so slow. So I'm so glad that I've been well enough to join you today, and thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, well, thank you for coming. And you know, we really do appreciate that, because obviously you've not been very well at all. So thank you for, putting us as a priority in your return to work.
No problem at all.
And of course, you're alumni as well. So you graduated from Leeds Trinity University. You did a journalism course here. Can you just tell us what it was that you did when you were studying here?
Yes, indeed. So I am an alumnus of the 2001 class. I did my postgraduate print diploma. So these names might be familiar to you: Jill Ursell, Tony Harker, Richard Horseman. Those are the people, the legends of Trinity North College, as was, who were my mentors really, and my tutors at the time. And it was a great course, a brilliant course, which gave me a fantastic grounding in print journalism at the time, which was what I thought was my present and future. And then, almost 20 years later, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying that. My journalism career took a whole different direction to what I expected. So I ended up at the BBC, which I never thought would happen.
It's amazing. Well, we're going to talk in a moment about that journey that you've had and your development as a journalist over those years, and to what's to come in the future as well. But just to let you know that we obviously are streaming live. We're live on YouTube, we're live on Facebook, and we do hopefully have people who are watching that are going to give us some really interesting questions to answer at the end of this session. So if you are watching, please get your questions in for Aisha. Just ask them anytime, and we will be catching up with those at the end. So Aisha, just to start then, today we are in a dramatic world of politics. We are all waiting on tenterhooks, are we not, for the American election results. And it's really, really kind of coincidental and timely that if you look back on your time when you were here at Leeds Trinity University, it was also a monumental time in American politics, but global politics have filtered down and had that influence on our world as we know it today. And that's because when you were at Leeds Trinity University, it was the opening for the Centre for Journalism, and on that very day it was also 9/11. Can you tell us about that?
Oh my God, yeah. You know what, thinking back at that time, I don't think anyone could have predicted the world changing moment that we were witnessing. So yes, it was the opening of the Centre for Journalism, as was at the time the new centre. I remember Martin Wainwright, the Guardian's Northern editor, was there at the time as a guest of honour, and we were just watching this. We were all chatting away, and then the news was on in the background, and then we saw these pictures of two planes flying into the Twin Towers, and no one could have predicted that the world was going to change in the way it did. And I think it didn't just change, it changed our whole world. It changed global politics, but it changed me, because I think it set me and my journalistic career in an ultimate direction, completely different to what I would have thought my journey was going to be. I think it shaped me as a journalist in ways that I didn't appreciate at the time, in terms of what would be my focus and the kind of journalist I would ultimately become.
And so can you tell me a bit about that? Because what kind of journalist have you become? it's very difficult when you're first starting out in journalism to know exactly who you're going to be, isn't it? So how did that shape you? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, my journey into journalism, I was, believe it or not, an ultra shy person, a shy young person. I know you wouldn't believe it. And for me, writing had been my only outlet. And so for me, I came into journalism purely to write. And to gain, all the other things that are associated with it, about truth and justice, all those things were really important to me. But ultimately, it was an outlet for me. And all the other things kind of, they just layered on top of that over time. And those are some skills you have naturally and some you learn. And so it was about so much more than writing. And also, we, even to this day, we're still hearing that there's an underrepresentation of people of color in journalism. Throughout my whole career, I've heard this. For the last 20 years almost, I have been hearing this. So I don't know to what level things, they clearly haven't changed enough, those things. But I never really set out as a journalist to be representative of anything. It was just something that I wanted to do. And so even, I had no real ambitions to work for national papers or anything like that. My focus was very much about community, about grassroots, about telling real people's stories, and actually just doing this job, which to me seemed like such a glamorous and amazing job. We all know about how glamorous it is or isn't ultimately, but being my own ethnic background was not a shaping factor in that at the start, but I think it became that over time, and certainly over the impact of 9/11, what it triggered, the global events, 7/7, all these things that followed. I became more aware than ever of my own identity as a South Asian woman, a South Asian journalist, a woman of color, and somebody from a Muslim heritage. I think all those things were not going to be. I had never envisaged they would be such shaping factors in my journey, but they ultimately have become that.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about your journey then, because obviously you were a green journalist, still wet behind the ears at that point in time. And then you went to the Yorkshire Evening Post, didn't you? And you forged a real career there. Can you talk to us about your career at the YEP?
Yeah, well, I'll go even further back, Rebecca, actually, because I started at a little newspaper called the Wokingham Times in Berkshire, which sadly is no more, because with the advent of the internet age, it closed and it went online. So that was a small weekly paper with a circulation of about 12,000, a small little market town in Berkshire. And that was like a very, a town in the southeast. Not very diverse in terms of the population. Then Reading was next to it. I moved there after a couple of years. That was a daily paper. Spent a couple of years there. That was part of the same group, the sister group of papers. But something about Leeds and Yorkshire, I was destined to return. And so yes, eventually I ended up coming back to Leeds. I didn't actually come back to the Yorkshire Evening Post. I came to a paper called the Asian Express. I came back there as a news editor. And this was, when I talk about shape, 9/11 helping to shape the kind of journalist I would become, that in a way was a seminal moment in that as well, because in that intervening time, 7/7 had happened as well. And one of the first big stories that I produced for my time at the Asian Express, where I was there for a year, was actually the first anniversary of 7/7. So these kind of big global events, and actually quite traumatic events, they've kind of followed me in my career in a way. I spent a year at the Asian Express, and then after that I went to the Yorkshire Evening Post, and spent 12 whole years there. And it is just the most amazing place. It was and still is the peak, the height of regional journalism. When you talk about big regional papers with huge, fantastic histories, it was absolutely the place to be in West Yorkshire. And I just loved it. I loved it, and started out as a patch reporter there, covering West Leeds, which is kind of Armley, Bramley, those kind of areas. And I know that you spoke to Laura Collins, the editor of the Yorkshire Evening Post, earlier this week, who is a very good friend and ex-colleague. And actually, we pounded the same patch at the start of our careers at the Evening Post. We both pounded the West Leeds patch. and we always say that the West Side is the best side. So we still have a romantic image of that. So after doing that for a few years, I then I'd always had an interest for grassroots politics, local politics. It's some people think it's geeky, and it's got a little bit of a twee kind of image and a not very glamorous image. But for me, when I think of politics and politics reporting, that kind of grassroots reporting, covering those planning meetings and those all that stuff that no one else would think to do, is actually what I really loved. I loved all that kind of nitty gritty and getting into, local level decision making, because it was about joining the dots between our local politicians and Westminster.
Okay,
the bubble up there, and so for me that was fascinating.
That sounds good. So, Aisha, we're having some internet problems at the moment, I think. So let me just I'll just ask you a question, and we'll see if we can keep this going, and if not, we might need to swap over.
About decision making.
Aisha, would you be able to switch your camera off, because we're having real problems connecting with you on the internet?
Oh dear. Okay, let me see if I can do that.
Thank you. And while you're working out how to do that, I just want to ask you a little bit about that local politics side of things, because it's like you say, it's not particularly glamorous or fashionable, is it? But the fact is that actually there's been great criticism in the government, the Cairncross report that was recently published, about this disenfranchising of the public with local politics, and actually disengagement with local politics. And local politics are so important, because really that is where your money's being spent. That is where the decisions are being made that will really affect you. So is one of the reasons that you've got such a passion for it?
Very much so, very much so. As I say, it's always been about politics with a small p for me. It's really weird. Of course, I'm fascinated by what happens in the corridors of power in Westminster, but it's very much about those decisions that those people are making up there, the power that they are or aren't giving to these people, the people at local level, who are the real decision makers when it comes to the key services that, in our lives, when it comes to the basic stuff. The analogy that's always used is bin rounds, isn't it? It's used so much, but it's absolutely true that it is the absolute core of local services. Local councils are the ones who are in charge of it. And so, it's something that affects us all. That's the thing, you forget that these are things that affect us all. Actually, those decisions and the resources are being decided at local level. And yeah, for me, it was such an important thing, because when you're talking about democracy, real democracy, it's about grassroots, local democracy in action. And so, yeah, Rebecca, it's been a struggle within myself, really, that because I just love it. I love local grassroots politics. And yet when you look at the turnouts in elections, the turnouts are always so low. It's like the average is like a third. And a third of the total electorate turning out for these things. And I just think, for me, that's just so wrong. And there's definitely something wrong, and it has been for a long time, and a disconnect between local and national politics. Hopefully, with the whole devolution thing that's going on at the moment, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more, things might change, but I don't know. I'm not sure how confident I am. But I think because of that disconnect, it makes my job as a local reporter, a local politics reporter, even more vital and even more important.
And it's quite interesting, because obviously we're talking about your job at the Yorkshire Evening Post, but then if we just fast forward a little bit, your role covering politics in Bradford. Bradford is a really diverse district, isn't it? It's a metropolitan city. It's obviously got a really mixed cultural heritage within that, and it's got various different politicians who represent various different points of view. It's quite a hot pot, and quite a kind of a place that there is national focus on quite often. So you take that, but then you also take your podcast that you've just recently launched, which podcasts are clearly going for a different audience to the traditional radio and print journalism audience. And so, there's ways and means of attracting new and wider and more diverse audiences. Do you think that the BBC is doing a good job of that at the moment?
I think they are trying their best to do a good job. I think we're getting there. I think this Yorkshire cast was a really important move for us. I think if we're going to start, if we're talking about joining the dots and about kind of removing that disconnect, and I think things like this are very important because we are the people on the ground who are here holding our
Disaster. Oh dear, we appear to be losing Aisha. So I'm just going to see if she's going to come back. Aisha, we're struggling with your internet.
Accountable, but the nature of the podcast.
Okay, so I'm just going to, Aisha, is it possible for you to switch over to your phone possibly? Because I know that you mentioned that you had your phone. So if you can try and join off your phone, and we're just going to hold on for a minute. If the audience could stay with us, we'd really appreciate it because I know that this is really tricky. Thanks, Aisha. So Aisha's going to be joining on her phone right now. And I'm going to be asking her some more questions. But in the meantime, if you've got questions to ask Aisha about her career, what we're going to be talking about in the coming section is we're going to be looking not only at politics, but also at South Asian culture and how Aisha's talked about that and worked along with that in her career as well, because she's got a dual focus, really. She's got the politics, and then also she's very interested in South Asian culture and also mentoring of young Muslim journalists, particularly. And local radio, and we're going to talk about how she got that foothold into BBC Radio. So if you've got questions, please bring those questions in now. And here she is back.
Hello.
Thanks, Aisha. Back again. So I was just telling the audience about what it is that we're going to be talking about next. Let's move on from politics, because actually politics isn't just what defines you as a journalist, is it? Because you've got so many strings to your bow, and one of those things is the Asian culture that you're interested in, and that obviously kind of galvanizes you a little bit as a person in terms of your cultural background, but like you say, was brought into that stark relief with 9/11 and probably has then just been there in the peripheral edges and at times coming into the fore. Can you tell me about your time at Fever Radio and how that's really kind of helped you get a foothold into the BBC?
Yeah, it's amazing. Honestly, I could go on about the local politics forever. I'm a total geek about it, but yes, definitely. So yeah, I spent the vast majority of my career so far in local newspapers. Never ever thought that I would have a career in broadcast. It never even occurred to me because I was just such a massively shy person that I preferred to stay behind the scenes and just the writing was a thing that it was about, and all the community stuff and putting myself out there, front and center. It just seemed strange to me, and so never even thought about it. And then it all happened serendipitously, really, by accident. I do a lot of voluntary work and community work and fundraising behind the scenes, or used to when I used to have more time to do so. And I was organizing a charity event, a fundraiser, and I went on to the local station, which is Fever FM, Radio Asian Fever, which serves the South Asian community. It's based in Hare Hills in Roundhay Road. And I just went on to one of the shows to promote and get a little bit of support for this event. And we just had such great banter, the presenter and myself, and he was the station manager, and he asked me to come and present a show, just come and have a go. And I thought, okay, well, why not? It was something new, it was a challenge. And from there started a 10-year relationship with Radio Asian Fever, where I presented all manner of shows, musical shows. I had a show called Brimful of Aisha.
Brilliant.
Yes, indeed. We had a bit of a straw poll and got some ideas from my Facebook community, my Facebook friends. And there were some others that we considered. Aish Baby, that was the other one.
Very good.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, that was one we went for. And so I presented that for a couple of years. I also presented. So it was fun, really. There was still some journalism in it, but actually it was just great fun. And it was a release for me. And actually it was a revelation in terms of my own confidence, but in terms of just making me think a little bit differently about what being a journalist is, really. Because, I maybe had quite kind of set ideas about it, and I was probably taking it all a little bit too seriously. But then this just allowed me to inject some fun into it. Ended up doing a show with another young lady who became one of my best friends. We just the two of us together, just having a great time on a Friday evening, We call the show the BBX, which I won't go into the long details of why, but essentially two women just yapping away as if, as you do for, after work on a Friday, and just playing a load of music in between. And that was great fun. We did that for about 5 years. And then I eventually ended up presenting a show with my husband, because I brought him into the Beaver family as well. He's called Woody, and we did a show called Mr. and Mrs. Khan. And this was a topical discussion show that we did every Tuesday evening, and it was about issues affecting the Asian community specifically. And actually, again, there was a lot of banter there and music, but actually we talked about some very serious and quite political topics. So we had discussions on issues like grooming gangs, about radicalization, about the joint family system, a big thing in the Asian community, and looking after the older generation, the aging population, a whole variety of things, lots of serious stuff, some quite light-hearted stuff as well. And actually, I have to say that I found revelatory as well. For me personally, I found that fantastic, because that was pure journalism. But I was doing it in a whole different way to what it was just a new experience for me, and I absolutely loved that. And it just goes to show, it opened my eyes to the possibilities of that you can shape the kind of journalist you want to become, but it doesn't have to be set in stone from the start. You might have an idea of what kind of journalist you are, but actually it can change overnight. And it literally did with me. It did, in a way, because that obviously that going on to that show that day to promote this little charity event, actually that was another trigger moment in terms of where my career then headed. And that was kind of at the halfway point of where I was at that point. So that was interesting. Eventually that led to me, well, I think it was a big factor in me eventually considering moving over to the BBC and going into broadcast. And I think that's where I ended up. Couldn't have predicted it, as I say, but that's where I ended up.
So if we talk about that, Aisha, could you turn your phone so it's on landscape, because I think it might make your mic a little bit louder as well. Okay. But also, just when we talk about, there you are. So when we think about that and that idea of kind of like making decisions and taking opportunities, you were doing that radio show 1 or 2 times a week alongside working at the Yorkshire Evening Post in various different guises. And when we spoke earlier, you talked to me about the fact that you've had opportunities handed to you sometimes, and you've had to make tough decisions, and that actually making those decisions and choosing the right things for you has really helped you kind of like get an idea of what you want to do and where you want to be. And you don't always have to say yes to everything. You have to say yes to the right things.
That's so true, Rebecca. That's so true. Because there was a seminal point in my career when I was at the Yorkshire Evening Post where, I had a choice to go down the management route, because everyone wants to progress, that kind of thing. And I had a go at it. I had a brief go at it. And people don't know that we've worked together. And at that time that you were there, I was there as well. And this is something that I had a go at. But no, I decided that, well, I think it got me thinking a lot about, again, where do I want to head with this? Why am I doing this job? And I decided not to do that, not to go down that route, because I love the kind of grassroots element and the storytelling element was so important to me. To be really involved in the storytelling element of the job was a massive part of why I continue to love it, why I loved it from day one, and why it remains a passion. Local journalism is a passion, and it will remain a passion, I think, forever for me. And so it was kind of, obviously I wanted new challenges, and so different directions was something I was considering. And so I think that desire to do something a little bit different but still keep that storytelling and that the love for community at the heart of what I was doing, and combining the politics as well, all of those things together, I think ultimately, when the job came up at the BBC, I think the timing was just perfect for me. Because I'd also loved Bradford from the start. I had so many friends there. I knew that it was a city that was, quite misrepresented in some ways. That's by default or by design, very reasons for that. And it's so much a microcosm of so many things in the country, both good and bad. And it is always held up as that. And so for me, that was a fresh and new challenge. So even though Leeds is a huge city and I absolutely love it, actually moving over to a smaller city, which was this microcosm of so many wonderful things, and where I had so many friends and so much interest, really personal interest as well. I thought it was just a fantastic challenge. And then obviously the additional challenge was the main challenge, that I was then going into broadcast as well. So I was getting to do a version of the job which, you know, it just organically, it grew organically, but it became actually my perfect version of the kind of journalism I want to do. And the timing was just right. And then also it allowed me to make that jump into broadcast as well. The timing was just right. And yeah, I'm so glad that I did it when I did it.
And so really, I mean, this all feeds into something that I talk to my students about quite a lot, which is that that I guess what I term it as is branded journalism, but you almost have to find your niche, don't you, as a journalist? And it's okay to do that. It's okay to go for being an objective, unbiased journalist, reporting factual, verified information, but also following interests and passions, and actually having a bit of fun with journalism as well, and actually creating a kind of furrow for your own path. So
following your heart, Rebecca, following your heart, because that's the thing. This job is not, we're not in it for the glamour. We're definitely not in it for the pay. You know, that's, you know, there's no illusions about this for those who are watching. And, you know, everyone, you know, who's watching, I'm sure will be aware of that. This is a passion that you follow. It's a vocation. It's a calling. You know, I might be overly romanticizing it, but genuinely, I feel that. I wouldn't be in the job almost 20 years later if I didn't feel that. And so, yeah, I do think that you have to follow your heart. And I do think, you know, there's still nothing like seeing your byline on the front page. Even like, I know I'm in radio now, but even to this day, seeing your byline on the front page of the Yorkshire Evening Post, and it's a story where you have actually, in some small way, changed a person's life. And like, even if when we talk about kind of, we talk about local politics and grassroots and storytelling and human interest. Those are things that are such vital ingredients in local journalism, good local journalism. And when you get that story that combines all those things, it's just a brilliant, brilliant feeling. And when you've managed to, you know, there's that cliche, isn't there, about the power of the press? But I tell you, it is so true. All, you know, all cliches are based in some truth. And we do have the power. We might not think we do, but we do. And I think there's probably an element of ego in it, you know, seeing your byline. You know, we are obviously.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah, but at the same time, that power you have to potentially change a person's life by making a simple phone call and just getting to the heart of something that might be quite a simple thing, you know, there's no feeling like it. And that is something that I will never, ever lose, I think. And if I ever do, then I will not be a journalist anymore.
Yeah, and it's funny because actually it's not dissimilar to what Laura Collins was saying in terms of that privilege of being able to tell people's stories and make those differences. So there's a couple of more things I do want to ask you about before we move to questions. One of those is that you have come from being this very shy, introverted person to presenting lots of different programs for the BBC, you know, talking to vast audiences, representing, you know, communities.
Going on the telly, Rebecca, going on the telly.
Exactly, all this. You have got a real passion for mentoring, haven't you? And you've done that from an early, you know, from the early off, really. So can you tell me a bit about your mentoring side of things?
Yes. So from the start, you know, I mean, this goes back again to when I was talking about, you know, when I started out, I didn't want to be pigeonholed. I wasn't there to represent anyone. I was just there to do something that I wanted to do. But it grew quite organically, and it became something that absolutely became a passion. Absolutely. So, you know, getting involved with various kind of charity groups and that kind of thing, and youth groups and community centres from the start. So I lost count of the number of times that I was asked to come and speak to, you know, a community youth group or, you know, some other group. And so I've held various sessions, you know, kind of media training sessions for young people, where we would do like mock press conferences, and I'd get them writing stories, that kind of thing. And with community groups, I've done the same. And then also in my job in Fever as well, we mentored young people who, you know, because Fever is a community radio station, let's not forget. And it's funded purely 50% grant funded, and all of the presenters are volunteers. None of them are professionals. I wasn't. I just came in off the street one day and started presenting. But nurturing young talent and giving opportunities to young people in an inner city part of Leeds who possibly might not even think this was something for them, that it was an opportunity that would never present to them. But these people come up, and at any one time they've got 40 people on their books, and they've done youth mentoring projects as well. And as I say, I've mentored people there. In fact, we put a call out to Leeds Trinity actually a few years back for young people who might consider, who might want to get a little bit of work experience. And so we took on 2 or 3 people in your cohort of about 4 or 5 years ago, who then came along and helped support me with presenting shows, and had a bit of a go of coming on air with me. And it just gave them hands-on experience, really, of broadcasting. And I think they really enjoyed it, and I definitely enjoyed it, because absolutely, we have to encourage the next generation. And actually, it's about myth busting as well. It's about kind of letting them know that, look, anyone can do it. There's cliches, isn't there, about what a journalist is? Whenever they're presented in films and things, do you not agree that we're presented as pushy people, and usually duplicitous, and it's never really, it doesn't really humanize us. But actually, at the heart of what we're doing, we're idealists, I think. And that's something that I wanted. That passion, that idealism, is something that I definitely want to pass on to young people. And you know what, it is the best job in the world. You know what, it's an absolutely hard work, we all know, and it's changing as an industry completely. However, at the heart of it, is idealism, and I think we shouldn't ever lose that. And so for me, it's really important to share that with young people.
Yeah, so we might have some young people watching today, student journalists from Leeds Trinity University or elsewhere, and they might be able to catch you on Twitter, for example, if they wanted to make contact with you and see if there's any mentoring opportunities out there.
And I am still involved with Radio Asian Fever on there, in the behind the scenes. So if anybody who is watching would like just a little bit of a taster, if you haven't really had a chance yet, if you're on a course, if you're considering a course, if you haven't really had a taster of real radio, then I can definitely help set that up. And of course at the BBC as well, at BBC Radio Leeds, absolutely, we are always happy to have people come in. And I work normally pre-COVID, I work out of a little office in Bradford at the Bradford University. So I've got my own little radio booth, and a little office that we run from there. And so at basic level, if you just want to come and see how it works on a basic level, definitely something that, please get in touch. Please do not be shy. Do not hold back. Get in touch. Just tweet me. My DMs are open. Just tweet me, and we can organise something.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And just a couple more things before we move on to questions. So one of those is that we talked earlier when we were talking between just the two of us about one of the biggest stories that you've ever covered and the most memorable. And I just wondered if you could tell the audience a bit about that, bearing in mind that some of the audience might not have been very old when it took place.
Yeah, they were definitely all born then, I think. But so this was actually the second year of my being at the Yorkshire University. When I think back of all the big stories that I've worked on, I would say that for each of my different papers I've worked at and different organisations I've worked at, there's probably one story that sticks out. But I would say to this day, the biggest story that I've worked on, like live breaking story, was Shannon Matthews, the disappearance of Shannon Matthews. Now, for those who don't know, she was a girl from Dewsbury who was kidnapped. She was abducted, and it started off a massive search. The biggest police operation that the West Yorkshire had done, they said, since the hunt for the Yorkshire Ripper. And actually, I was a person who got that quote out of the policeman who compared the two. I remember because I went down to Dewsbury. There was they were searching. Police were searching the river down there. Grim stuff. Went down to the press conference and reported live from there. And then I remember being out when all the demonstrations were going on, the kind of marches, to raise awareness, bring Shannon home. And of course, for those who don't know, and I'm sure everyone who's watching does know, it turned out that her mum was the culprit. She was the person who set this whole thing up, and it was all inspired by an episode of Shameless, and it just, it was just a huge story. And that cliche, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. And so to be part of that, it will always forever stick in my mind. I've worked on some huge stories, but I would say that in terms of the just the sheer unbelievability of it and the uniqueness of it, I don't think I will ever work on another story like that.
No, these stories do stick in your mind, don't they? And so, you know, that story, people remember where they were when she was found, and I think she was found underneath her stepdad's bed or something like that, wasn't she? They kept her.
And she will be the age of some of the people watching, I guess, now.
Mm-hmm.
She was 8 years old at the time when this happened, yeah. So
yeah, so a monumental time in our history in West Yorkshire.
Google it, please.
And finally, Aisha, before we move to questions, we do have some questions, so we'll move to those in a moment. But before that, could you just give us a couple of your top tips to aspiring journalists who maybe were sitting in your shoes when you were there 20 years ago, thinking, I'll never be able to present on radio?
20, yeah, 19. But well, I think I probably covered it already, but I would say that if I was talking to my younger self, you know, just don't be afraid. Don't think that you have to be a particular kind of journalist. Don't think that there is only one path to success. Just, you know, going and working on the Sunday Times or, you know, the Guardian, you know, it's amazing, it's brilliant, but it's not the only way. And you know what? It's ultimately enjoy it. You know, you will quickly find your journalistic passion if you haven't already. And then pursue that, you know, pursue that to the end and take advantage of opportunities that arise to diversify, you know. You know what? It's the way we do journalism has changed so much in terms of the social media age, in terms of, you know, so much has changed, you know, print journalism on its way out, you know, I mean, we could go on forever. But ultimately, at the core, it is all about people. You know, it isn't about telling people stories and being there to represent them and fight for those who can't fight for themselves. You know, those core principles are at the heart of it. And don't be shy, don't hold back. And contacts. Nurture your contacts. Don't necessarily have a contacts book, but please don't, where you can have an opportunity to speak to someone on the phone, don't just text them or tweet them, you know. Build relationships with people, because that is where you're going to get your best stories. You know, the first meeting you might not, you know, just use the example of, you know, that person who rings up from the local community centre who's got some little event that they want to advertise, and you can help them with that. You know, 5 years down the line, they might bring you the story of your life. And, you know, it's those intervening years in between those 5 years that are going to be key to that. So, yeah. It's quite a romanticized view of it, I think, but it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, it's building trust, it's building relationships and community. Absolutely. I guess, isn't it? Yeah.
So those things will never change, you know. Yes, the ways in which we kind of nurture those relationships might change, but yeah, don't be afraid of building real contacts and real relationships with people. Definitely.
Great. Okay, good top tips. So let's move to some questions. And you never know, some of these questions might be so striking that you remember them afterwards when they come and ask you for work experience, Aisha. So first of all, we've got most.
I've got some Twitter notifications coming of people starting to follow me. So this is good.
Excellent. I'm pleased to hear it. So we've got, starting off with Mohsen Ali on Facebook, and we've got, what's the most unexpected skill you developed for your journalistic career?
Well, becoming a radio presenter. Yeah, that's complete. And then becoming a TV, you know, a TV reporter. It's just ridiculous. Honestly, it's something that I never would have thought that was ever going to happen. So yeah, that was definitely unexpected.
Brilliant. Okay. So we've got Noah.
I'll tell you another one that whenever I meet people and I tell them that I'm shy, they don't believe me. So, you know, that's, you know, I guess that's unexpected in itself. But the fact that the image I had of myself and of the perception that I thought other people had of me, you know, it's surprising as well. And, you know, the fact that I do the job I do is in no short way, you know, it's a big factor in that.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. So on to Noah's question, and that's from YouTube. And how do you keep a politics story balanced when there is an ever-increasing amount of fake news being held up as truth? Do you think this problem is worse or better lower down in local politics?
I think the problem is exactly the same. You know, it all comes down to, ultimately, it comes down to due diligence and you doing the best you can do to make sure something is balanced. That's the key. If you don't make the effort in the first place to balance it out, then you're on a loser from the start. The point is, you get those calls into the relevant people. You make sure you know your media law. You know about right to reply. You know about defamation. All those things, all those core principles of what makes good balanced journalism, they are so vital. And if you live by them, you can't really go wrong. So yes, there is a fake news out there, but verify things. Don't believe something just because it's on Twitter. That's not news. Just because someone's tweeted something, that is not news. The news is when you go away and do your due diligence and do the investigating and verify and confirm and give people the right of reply. It's simple processes, really.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Well, that's.
Sorry, did I? Is it going?
Yeah, it totally does. It totally does. So thank you. So Rebecca on YouTube asks, have you ever faced sexism within your broadcasting career, and how did you overcome it if you did?
I don't. Oh, am I muted? Oh, I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
I don't actually recall. I have to say, I don't recall in my professional career having faced it. And this is, it might be unheard of. I genuinely can't think in my professional work, have I faced sexism? I don't think I have. And I think that's, that might be luck. That might be pure luck.
But good luck if that's the case. Okay, have we got any more questions?
I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but certainly, I don't think that is anything that's hindered me in any way.
That is good to know, and it's actually that's real opportunity for other females out there who are watching this and kind of worrying about that element of it. That actually it's not as in some areas it might not be as prevalent as maybe you think.
Don't go in thinking, don't go in expecting that. Just do the best job that you can and keep that passion alive, and it's going to shine through eventually. Those opportunities will present themselves to you. Just grab them when they do.
And Carolyn Jackson Brown, one of my colleagues, is asking on Facebook, how do you join the dots for the regions in practice? So I guess by that Carolyn's asking, how do you kind of bring together the regional areas that you're covering in Yorkshire and actually kind of do the oversight, I guess?
Specifically in relation to my politics job?
I guess so, yeah.
So we've got a team of reporters. So the BBC has got a team of regional reporters up and down the country. In West Yorkshire, I'm BBC Radio Leeds, and myself, I cover Bradford. And then I've got Kevin Larkin, who's my colleague, who covers other local authorities in West Yorkshire. And then we've got another reporter in York, another in Sheffield, covering South Yorkshire. So that's how we draw it. We resource it, obviously, at basic level. The resource has to be there. Don't get me started on that about the lack of resourcing in other areas. But no, we're lucky there that we do. You've got to have that person on the ground who has that local knowledge and is there specifically to seek out those stories. And then, for example, Politics North is a program which is very much a regional program. And then what we do, we draw on those collective resources, and then we draw stories out of that. So, people on the ground, I guess. I don't know. Does that answer the question?
I think so, yes. I think it does. That's great. Oh, and we've got one coming.
It's because we've got a team in Westminster, of course. We do work closely with all the other, political team up and down the country. So, Alex Forsyth, Laura Kay. There might be a time when I'll get an email that, all the local reporters have got. So we do work very much collaboratively, because it's sharing of information is so important. And working collaboratively, I think, is so important. So, actually, collaboration is key, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you. And so Jordan on YouTube is asking, what originally inspired you to push for a career in journalism?
It was purely the fact that writing was my outlet. And so I was looking at careers which allowed me to write. And so that was it. And so probably about the age of 12, my careers advisor, I talked to, and one of the booklets they gave me was journalism, and I can't even remember what the others were, but immediately struck me. And as I say, purely the writing, I was really scared. I thought, because all the stuff I've been talking about throughout this, about being brave and kind of, not holding yourself back. I had an idea of what a journalist was, and I was very, very scared and very worried that I didn't fit that. I didn't tick those boxes, and I didn't fit that mold. But actually, I did. Because anyone can be a journalist. Anyone can. We all have something to bring to the table, and that's it. I think just take that kind of core skill you have and the passion that you have, and nurture that, and you'll be fine.
And I think we've got one last question coming in from Alicia Whitehead, who's asking, what skills are imperative for students wanting to have a career in journalism? So that's a good one to finish on.
Yes, it is. Right, I'm going to say it. Know your media law, definitely. Absolutely. The core skills are so important. Get your shorthand. It's really important. There's quite a lot I saw a quite interesting and quite lively discussion on Twitter a few weeks back, actually, about whether shorthand in this day and age was an important skill. Yes, learn your shorthand, because there are going to be situations where technology is going to let you down, and you know what, there is no substitute for a good note. A good shorthand note, there is no substitute for it. What else? Be persistent, be brave, be true to yourself and the kind of stories you want to tell.
Yeah, well, that is a brilliant finishing point, and thanks so much for joining us, Aisha, because clearly coming back after being so poorly and giving our students this really open, honest insight into your career, and it's just brilliant. So thank you so much, and I hope that you continue to feel much better.
Oh, thank you so much. And do you know what? Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm so glad that I was well enough to join you, because genuinely I do feel that it is such a wonderful and great job. Honestly, it's so rewarding, and even if you've got that tiny little spark, and if I can help to keep that spark alive and to grow it, then I will do that. And so if anyone who's watching has any questions at all, then get in touch. Follow me on Twitter at Aisha Iqbal. You can email me. My email address is on my Twitter as well. And yeah, any advice I can give, guidance I can give, or if I can help open any little doors to you getting some work experience, and I'm very happy to do that. So please don't hold back. Please do get in touch.
Thank you. And so tomorrow, for Journalism and Media Week, we are starting off tomorrow with Harris Ahmed, who's the creative director at H Digital. So do tune in for that. It'll be live and you can ask questions. And thanks, Aisha, and I hope we catch up again soon.
Thank you, and good luck, everyone.